Yeah.
Okay, so we now have audio and we're live. If anyone is tuned in, please be patient. We are waiting for two of our elected officials who are leaving a meeting to get here, and it should be probably in 5 minutes. We'll get started. And now can we?
Yes.
begin, or-
I think that worked.
It had it.
I don't know why it's glitching. I'm pretty sure it's muted, but I will.
Okay, not sure what we talked about.
Okay, at the last meeting, I believe y'all said y'all are rolling over 443,000 for next fiscal year. Is that still the number?
It's not
Yeah,
Let me-
and I will slow it down for if we don't get to the budget. I mean,
You are officially unmuted, so you can call
very
it.
nice. It is 5:27, and I am calling to order the meeting of the Financial Audit Committee for the Children's Services Council of Leon County. And Holly, is it you? Okay, Ms. McPhail, if you would be so kind as to call the order.
Brent Johnson,
Here. Oh, sorry.
Superintendent Hannah. School Board Member Jones,
Yes.
Chair Mitchell,
Here.
you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. If I could, gentlemen, get a motion for the approval of the
So
agenda.
moved.
I have a motion. Second. And a second by Mr. Johnson. Without objection, show the agenda approved. Ms. McPhail, item 4 is general public comment.
We have no general public comment at this time.
Very nice. Which brings us to item 5, which is a financial auditing services. As you all know, we currently use the services of, I always mess it up, but it's Purvis and Gray.
Purvis Gray,
Purvis Gray,
and they had finished their last engagement.
right, which we just finished. That was really a 3-year, but it was an audit of 2.5 years of our books. This will be a new procurement going out as an RFP that will ask for, well, the way it is drafted right now is for a 5-year contract. We would have, the old finance committee used sort of an industry standard. You don't want the same financial auditor, getting into too many years. And there is sort of a difference of opinion as to what is too many years. Certainly 10 years is too many years. But there was some discussion as to whether or not 6, 7, or 8 would be appropriate. So the way the RFP has been drafted is for a 5-year contract. We can make it a 3-year contract with 2 possible 1-year amendments or extensions, or we can just go with a 5-year contract. And that is essentially what the item is. And I am totally open to hearing from both of you thoughts on what you would like to do, other than the fact that we do need to go out for bid on it. Mr. Johnson.
This is a data point. Are there any option years remaining on the Purvis Gray contract?
Yeah, it was a straight 3-year
3-year.
contract.
Okay.
Got that, they've been paid, and so that engagement.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Go for it.
I'll continue. I did review the RFP in detail, and I would put my comments into 2 buckets. One would be what I would consider Scrivener notes. That would just be simple corrections that would be time consuming for us to go through here. But the second were more substantive with an objective of, in particular, defining in section C, some of the minimum qualification of respondents that would conform more with searches for auditing firms. And I think those, again, I didn't have time to come in with a red line version. But I think it would be a pretty quick fix that I just didn't get done in advance of this meeting. But the 2 major areas were Scrivener defining the minimum qualifications, and then I thought it would enhance the RFP and the contract if we could bake in some timelines into the responsiveness, not just to the RFP, but in their audit work that would help ensure that we would get responses from the completion of field work and completion of the audit that would allow us to meet the financial reporting requirements of the commission.
I think, and I think last year's did have the specific timeline in it.
This one does as well, kind of.
It's just page 22.
So
I did get to page 22.
So But I think the Scrivener error, we can certainly make and accept a motion to clean those up. I will say that, Mr. Johnson, I am guilty of having flipped through it and recognized it as very similar to as the last one. But I appreciate the fact that you went through it, and especially based on what you do for a living, I would be very. It did for a living, that's correct. I would be open to, again, much like the correction of a few of the Scrivener errors. If there are minimum qualifications that you think would meet a standard, I'm willing to, let you work with staff to come up with that. I just don't want this to have to wait until the next budget committee if we can at all avoid it. See,
So, Mr. Chair, yes, that is absolutely fine. And so with your motion, if the committee decides, you can move to accept Scrivener's notes with that, as well as Councilmember Johnson working with staff to clean up the RFP, with us sending it back to your committee if you choose and want to read it one more time. But it will keep us with our July 18th presentation to the council.
it would be, okay, so what I would hope is that we could get a motion that basically adopts, Sika, what you just said, allowing at least a day where it comes back to us. We're making the recommendation essentially based on our trust in what Mr. Johnson's motion is, but the full board will vote on this. And as long as it meets the public notice qualifications and requirements, and we each have a chance to take a look and make sure we have no objection.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move that we accept the RFQ as presented with whatever necessary edits and Scrivener errors and input from our council member regarding minimum qualification.
Very good. And if I could ask just kind of one comment, the issue about the terms. I'm totally good with the 5 years, but I really like it if everybody doesn't have an objection to a 3-year and with possibility of 2 1-year extensions.
I'll accept that amendment.
Thank you very much. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hannah. Please let the record show that Superintendent Hannah is present. I have a motion and a second. Mr. Johnson, any comments before we vote?
Well, I just discussion would be, I had asked the executive director what kind of response that the council got in the first RFP process, and it seemed pretty limited. And I'm wondering if you're asking any professional services firm to contract fixed fee for a 5-year period in the environment that we're in, if there would be any consideration to do it in terms of one contract with 3 1-year deliverables with the option for at least a CPI uptick over 1 year to the next. And you guys obviously at the schools have, I mean, when you're asking somebody to commit for 5 years, what ends up happening is that they could be pricing your contract so it's heavier in the first year than it needs to be, because they don't have any opportunity contractual to come back to the well for any increase in the contract over the term of the agreement. But if there's no appetite for that, I just wanted to bring it up to see if we could get more than 3 or 4 respondents.
Mr. Jones, would you?
No, well, as you can imagine, particularly with CSCs and the purpose, but he also does the school district, the respondents that you get for these audits are based upon those persons who are involved in those particular areas of specialty. And so any additions that you would make in terms of minimum qualifications will still be commensurate with what we are already more than likely receiving in terms of those who are qualified to meet the needs of as described in the school board.
I remember the 2 respondents, and that's all we got the last time, if I remember. what set Purvis Gray apart, they were both really good responses. But what set them apart was the fact that they were, it was 3 audits, but the first audit was for half a year. And they essentially gave us a discount for that first half a year. That really was, it was a price difference. I mean, it was like, do you want a Chevrolet or do you want a GMC? Do you want the gold bow tie or do you want the, the red GMC? Because both of their submissions were very much the same. I wonder if we broke it into a 3-year and then 2 1-year extensions, if we could leave it at the council's discretion, if they chose whoever we choose, if in the first 1-year extension and the second 1-year extension, consideration could be given, again, with the full vote of the council, or an increase so that it may make it a more competitive procurement than we got the last time. Again, with only 2. Mr. Jones, your point is probably a good point, and that is, I sit on like the Early Learning Coalition. It's round up the usual suspects. There were people who love this kind of work, and they're good at it. But we could certainly build that in where there are no guarantees, but they could, whoever the winning vendor is, they could come to the council and ask for an increase, and we could certainly consider it in the first 1-year extension, and also the same process in the second 1-year extension.
So, staff, I'm sorry, just so that there's a knowledge on what the price was. So we actually had 3. So James Moore, Thomas Hall Ferguson, and Purvis Gray were the 3 respondents. Purvis Gray did $10,000 for the half a year, $1,950 for the first full year, and $20 for the 3rd year. So just to give you an idea of what those were.
Built in a little.
Well, I'm sorry, a little uptick from year 1 and year 2.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember Thomas Helfer, so you said.
James Moore.
Okay. All right, so we basically have a motion that, a motion and a second that contemplates the Scrivener's error, allowing Mr. Johnson the ability to go through and make sure there's qualifications that he's going to work with staff on. It changes the 5-year to a 3-year with the possibility of 2 1-year extensions. That's the motion and the second. Does anyone it sounds like the winning bidder the last time did build in sort of a CPI, if you will.
But we specifically asked them to price it out per year.
Okay.
So we didn't ask them to give us the price, and that would apply to all 3 years. They had to price it out for each year, and we gave them the scope of the half a year for year 1, the full year for year 2, which was technically our first complete year, and then the full year for year.
So if under this concept, we could take Mr. Johnson's, make the requirement that they bid it for the first 3 years. No one knows what year 4 and year 5 is going to look like. So they would have the ability to come back in, and for the first 1-year extension, if we were happy with their services, and the second 1 year, we could negotiate a different fee if we chose to.
Exactly.
This motion is for a fixed rate for 3 years, correct?
Well, no, it says you have to tell us what you're charging in year 1, what you're charging in year 2, and what you're charging in year 3. The same way the one we're currently working here did.
I didn't know I said all of that.
You are very, very good with words. It's that English major. Yeah.
All right.
That's what the.
Yeah, that's
what
just
you-
what the
That's the scope of
Yeah.
work, 75. Right. Did we vote?
So would you, so you're you're open to amending your motion to include a 3-year with 2 1-year extensions,
That was a motion.
as well as allowing them to come back in the 2 1-year extensions and ask for an increase.
Yes, because if the whole purpose of doing the 3 with the 2 additional years provides us either one to put it back out to bid after 3,
Right.
or if we go into a 1-year renewal or 2nd-year renewal, then the opportunity to renegotiate is already in line,
Yes. Okay.
right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any discussion before we go to public comment?
No, right?
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
I would just ask for the clarification that it's a 3-year fixed fee. Is that what I'm hearing? 3-year fixed fee and then the option for,
Possibly, we're asking them what they're going to charge year 1, year 2 year.
that's not, okay. The only reason I was saying, asking for clarification is the current RFP makes it, and I understand we modified it, so I do understand that, but it was a 5-year fixed fee divided, you get paid 20% of your
That's what we
fixed
had,
fee
5 years.
over 5 years.
And
Okay,
it was 2020, 2021.
Right, so this is gonna look different. This is gonna
Yeah,
look
I agree.
exactly as Mr. Johnson laid out, which is the way we are currently operating with 2 possible 1-year extensions. That's the distinction.
So the timeline, give me 1 second, so the timeline would change so that we get a price for year 1, when that's done, they get paid. Year 2, when that's done, they get paid. Year 3, when that's done, they get paid. If we're good with that, we'll negotiate for year 4 and year 5. Well, year 4, then year 5, we're good with year.
For public comment, Mr. Ham?
But in a fixed fee, it's by year 1, 2, 3, so year 1 could be 20, year 2 could be 21, year 3 could be 22. We're running into that problem now. We did fixed fee over the 3-year period. Now, 3 years later, they're going to time out, wait a minute, is there anything we can do to adjust this? So we are facing that issue in the school district. I think it's good that it's built in.
Yeah. And we have contemplated 3 years in advance, really 4 years in advance, the fact that we can't predict what prices look like. Hopefully they'll be the same. Okay,
So we're clear on what adjustments need to be made as far as the timeline and cost structure.
and you are going to make sure that, 1, it meets the public notification requirement.
Oh, yeah.
2, that you're going to shop it with the 4 of us after Mr. Johnson's input. Make sure there's no objection before we go to the full council.
Yes.
Okay, is there public comment?
There's no public
Very
comment.
good. I have a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Show the item adopted. There are, any council member comments on this particular agenda before we go to the full? No, finance and committee meeting. Great.
Chair Mitchell, just to clarify the process for our new council members, once everything is done in accordance with your vote, we will bring it to the July 18th meeting. The council, we expect, will adopt it and it will be released. When it is released, we will follow the procurement process that is outlined here in that RFP. So this audit committee will not need to convene again.
Thank you. So it is 5:46. Please show the Financial Audit Committee as adjourned. And it's still 5:46, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee for the Children's Services Council of Leon County. Holly, if you would call the roll.
Sure. Brent Johnson,
Present.
Superintendent Hannah,
Here.
School Board Member Jones,
Yes.
Chair Mitchell.
Here.
You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you very much. Item 3 is the approval of the agenda that was sent out to us on Wednesday of last week. Can I get a motion for the approval?
So move.
Have a motion? Second. I have 2 seconds. I have a motion by Mr. Jones and a second by Mr. Hannah. Without objection, show the agenda approved. Item 4 is general public comment for the Finance and Budget Committee. And I believe we have some.
Our first speaker is Emily Fritz. Please state your name and address when addressing the council. Thank
Okay,
you.
my name is Emily Fritz. I live at 1433 Bouquet Drive. I've got some new numbers from the last meeting, which is kind of cool. At the general council, at the CSC general meeting, at the last meeting, I suggested that you adopt the rollback rate, the millage rate for next year. And I suggested that if you sharpen the pencil, you wouldn't even feel it. Well, I'm looking at these new numbers and you wouldn't even have to sharpen the pencils very much, because with the new number, even with the rollback rate, you bring in $206,501,000. That's only, and I'm not saying this lightly, like it's a small number. That's only $553,000 difference. It's my understanding that you have 443,000 that's unencumbered at this point in time. So assuming that's not spent, you would have 400, you would have that to roll over. So that makes the differential about $100,000 something dollars. And there are some ways you can sharpen the pencil, like you have $300,000 budgeted for SIPs and capacity building. And y'all spent a lot of money on capacity building over the last few years. You are not a venture capital fund. Perhaps it's time for these organizations to stand on their own 2 feet and perform services without you having to invest more and more taxpayer dollars into their organization. So you could easily make up the difference just by reducing those numbers. And I see you've got 32,000 for community outreach and events. When people talked about voting for the Children's Services Council, I don't recall anybody saying that they were voting because they wanted the CSC to do events. That's not direct services, as far as I know. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But I see a lot of opportunities for you to sharpen the pencil, and you could easily go with the rollback rate with having minimal impact on your provision of services. And so I'm suggesting that when y'all come to the meeting next week, that you go with the rollback rate. And contrary to what Superintendent Hannah said at the last meeting, I don't ask for the rollback rate every year. I did last year, but I haven't asked for it in years previously. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fritz. I did want to make sure that those watching at home know that 2 of our council members who are not on the committee but are in attendance, Simone Marsteller and Commissioner Cummings are both here. So let the record show that they are in attendance. And I thank you both for being here. Do we have additional?
There's no more public comment at this time.
Okay, okay. All right, so item 5 is the Fair Labor Standards Act discussion. Is that something you'd like to lead?
Just to provide a quick update. So upon further investigation, I wanted to make sure that I got this right. I believe that all of our positions meet an exemption so that we do not have to adjust for the increases that the 2024 Fair Labor Standards Act has imposed. So we should be fine. And should not have to do that. The only case where I could see that as a possibility could be in the future if we hire a true admin full-time person that does not have any professional or executive responsibility. So, and I literally finally got that answer 15 minutes before this meeting started. So I did want to provide that update and let the committee know that.
Great. Any questions for Ms. Green? That's great news. That really is. Thank you. Item 6 is the truth in village. And Dina, I'm gonna let Ms. Snyder kind of walk us through.
Yes.
This is sort of that piggybacks on some of the comments that Ms. Fritz made. The numbers that we're looking at here are based on the property appraiser's projections as to what the total value of property will be when they go to apply whatever millage rate the taxing authorities in Leon County vote for. In the past, it's been close, but we've always erred on the side of caution and been conservative. So we have always brought in more money than we were anticipating. And it's almost like we built that into our budget. Ms. Fritz is right in the fact that last year we did do a rollback. And just so Mr. Johnson and Ms. Marsteller know, the council originally had to make this decision. We made it with very little information because we were brand new. And it was really a collective effort. The council came up with a 0.375 millage rate. The law allows us to charge up to 0.5 mils. We agreed, and it was, I think, a very nice compromise at 0.375. We collected 0.375 mils for 2 years. The economy took a little bit of a hit, and we had more money in the coffers than we were using at that point. And we were sort of finding our sea legs and growing as an organization, but not really funding an awful lot of programs. A lot during the summertime, but really we were making sure that all decisions we made were the best use of the taxpayers' dollars, to the best of our ability. And so last year we rolled the millage rate back. That's ended up collecting around $600,000 more than we had in past years. So the term rollback doesn't mean you collect less. It just means that property values are going up and we're building new properties. So we have a task at hand. The committee has in the past, nothing that prohibits us from doing it differently this time, has made a decision not to make a recommendation to the board, the full board, but to rather have this conversation again with all members of the council and allow them to make up their mind based on good data that we're providing. Dina, I tip my hat to you for one, sort of on the fly getting, and it was Ms. Fritz's request at the last meeting that we provide what a rollback rate would be so that we're providing all members of the council an ability to make a decision based on what they think is the right number. You got to take the millage rate and you got to mix it with the budget. And the budget, again, we've been sort of lucky in the past couple of years, and that is we've had more in the budget than we've needed. I think we were good stewards of that money in that we invested it and we got a nice return on the investment. But that is money that could otherwise be in a taxpayer's pocket and not the council. But again, it was a decision we made. What I have found is as a council, the longer we're in existence, the more we've seen programs that are deserving of funding. We are spending more than we have in the past. And regardless of how much money is in the coffers, we have a job to do, and that is to make sure that we're meeting our budget. We're not going over the budget. And we're not we can't go over that which we have in our account. So that's kind of where we are as a council. We were able to spend more than we had originally budgeted for during the the summertime. We're able to fund a program for kids with special needs during the summertime. But that, I believe, was about $650,000 more than we had budgeted this time last year. Again, we were fortunate that we had it in our account. So that's the setup. Ms. Snyder, do you want to kind of walk us through what we're looking at here? And I think it make the most sense to start with the budget, because from the budget drives the millage rate.
So, in looking at the budget, you will see the very first column is the current fiscal year 23-24 amended budget. This was the one that would have been approved at the last council meeting. When we move one column over at this point, you're looking at the millage rate of 0.31.
You have a big copy. Oh, yeah. Here, I know these numbers. I don't know.
No,
You're
we have
all
some
right.
good ones.
No, you
Yeah.
just, okay.
If you want something just slightly bigger to look at.
Thank you.
She's right here.
Oh. Simone, you have one, right?
Yep, she wrote them. The big ones.
Very nice. Thank you. Jean.
Okay, in looking at the second column, the millage rate is at the 0.3153, which would put us at ad valorem proceeds of $7,618,881 with a 95 collection rate and an interest at 2% of $152,378 with the total income at $7,771,259. If you go down from that column, you will be able to see what our expenses are allocated. We're looking at the reserves funds, which is the 8% in contingency and the 2% in catastrophe at the $761,888. We continue to go down. You will see where the compensation and employee benefits are, the $656,200. It continues on further with the contracted staffing at $294,000, contracted services at $32,500, collection expenses at $230,766, communications at $7,000, dues and subscriptions at $22,250, information technology at $31,700, insurance business at $25,000, occupancy at $87,724, office supplies and supports at $3,850. If you flip to the back, it'll continue with the administrative expenses in travel at $21,500 and in other miscellaneous at $13,500. All of those expenses across the board for all of the millage rates will remain the same, taking into account any increases in the cost for health insurance and benefits, any increases in information technology. Some of the expenses have gone up just a little bit from last year based on just a natural increase by the organizations on the cost for the service. If we continue to go down that line and we get into the program investments and supports for at the 0.3153 millage rate, you will be looking at, now, one of the things that I did want to mention is that all of these programming scenarios and suggestions are in essence new program funding, which means that whether we are currently funding it right now, the actual contract ends on or by September 30th of this fiscal year, meaning that all of these scenarios are here for consideration by the council to determine whether they would want to continue with this funding or not. We actually put it into the individual categories, but it is a determination that the council will need to make or will be making whether they want to continue funding those programs.
And Dina, that is just again for, especially for the new folks. The funding that ends on September 30th is funding that was made 18 months or 2 years in advance. So it is just, depending on which program it is just coming to an end on September 30th. The decision as to whether or not to spend it is not we don't need to go into each specific item by putting it into the bucket, into the category itself. So we can, it would be a very lengthy July 18th meeting. Is that the date?
Yes.
It would be a very long meeting. I will not take ZQL that night. But the actual category of how we're funding it, we're doing it based on, or what the way Dina has done it is based on how we've done it historically. So, again, I look Brent at you and Simone just to kind of give you that as some background. And one final thing, Dina, on the numbers, they are ever so slightly different depending on the millage rate because of what we have to do. What we pay to have the funds collected for us is based on how much they collect. So
My
that's,
apologies, that would
Yeah,
be
yeah.
one of the line items.
there are not many line items that change. Yeah, like, what is it?
Smiling at Chair Mitchell because.
Yes.
Yes.
By the way, there are no additional employees that are required to collect this tax. Just, it doesn't cost more to put it on the postcard, but it is, statute does, allow them to charge us. So it goes into someone else's budget and out of ours, nonetheless. Go ahead.
So when we're looking at the program investments and supports, I can go over those. We have the youth mentoring programs that will be ending September 30th. We did have currently 4 organizations that are funded for youth mentoring services. And the proposal would be for the funding to continue from October 1st until May 30th of 2025. To May 31st, that's right, of 2025. Part of that would be because we're looking at the possibility of implementing year-round out-of-school time. When you're looking at the youth development programs and out-of-school time, it would be for summer camps, scholarships, summer expo, and year-round out-of-school programming that would incorporate that youth mentoring component into it. So the goal would be, in essence, to be able to allow the currently 4 funded programs that are receiving youth mentoring funding to be able to plan so that they could, in essence, when the summer programming opened or the youth development programming opened in May, they would then at that point be ready and eligible to be able to apply and look at the possibility of being provided year-round out of school time services.
So what would happen in the month of, I'll call it August and September, certainly all of September and part of August, would, if for that particular bucket, the youth violence prevention bucket, so we would continue their funding, let's just say exactly as it is, that would get us to May 31st. Some of May is, they would start to get a little summer funding, but you have June and July, assuming they qualify for that, they put in an application, and then half of August. So now you've got these groups funded through the middle of August of 2025. What happens from the middle of August until September 31st of 2025?
So the goal would be for them to do their application that would cover the duration of that. So in essence, it would start from the June 1st, let's say, for them to get funding, and it would go year round until the following, whether we did it for the 1 year or whether we did it for more than 1 year. Let's say it was 1 year with a possibility of being able to renew at that second, it would just be round. So there would be no gap in that month that you're saying for August and September,
Okay.
for there to be services provided.
So for those who are interested in providing youth mentoring, youth violence prevention services during summer camp, who aren't one of these 4, how would, because it seems like we're sort of targeting the 4 that we already have, are.
At that point, the procurement would open,
It's
so
open.
anybody
Okay.
would be eligible to apply when the time came. So the current 4 programs that are funded, their funding would end by May 31st, at which point everyone would have to reapply during the procurement process.
And if I could just to clarify very quickly. So the idea is, in order for us to really look at moving the needle and being able to follow kids, we need to get them in some sort of year-round programming, so we're not getting a different set of kids every summer. So we'll do the 9-month funding. And this is for those programs that it is deemed that they will continue.
Okay.
So we've got 4 that we're funding. I think I'm safe at saying all 4 of them may not be offered the opportunity to continue. They get to continue through that 9 months, but at that time, we are suggesting to open a procurement for youth development programs and out of school time for things or camps that start in the summer and then shift into out of school time for the remainder of the year. So again, we're getting children involved and we're following those kids all the way around. So that could be a completely new set of programs. It could be the ones that we've already funded, but they will overlap. So if there are those that were funded in that 9 months and they meet and get funded for the summer, they would roll right into summer and then roll.
Do we need to put additional dollars then in this bucket? Or is the 445, I know that was based on a year, so is it?
So this 445 is only based on the possible renewal of those 4 programs that we are already funding for that 9 months. When you go down to.
How much should we spend in this bucket the previous year? It
was about 545. You approved 900 and some change.
This 445 is based on 8 months.
Yes.
I got it. Okay. That makes sense too. Okay.
If we keep moving further down, we're gonna get into early learning kindergarten readiness. And right there, we have an allocated $2 million, which would be for the ELC on-ramp, rebound and recovery expansion, and housing supports for families. If you think back to the ELC contract, it ends on September 30th. That was 250,000 allocated. So this will be for consideration for the council to determine whether they wanted to continue funding the childcare tuition assistance program that was partnered with ELC. And we also have the rebound and recovery expansion, which also ends at the end of August. Actually, they will be submitting their final report to us at the end of this month. And that program, that award was for $445,200, which in essence, the council will make the determination and consideration whether they wanted to continue an expansion of that program for year 2. They would be willing or able to provide a plan in essence to be able to continue the expansion. And then any funding left in that would be for the priorities that the council determined for kindergarten readiness and early learning, to include housing supports for families. One of the initial, when we looked at the spending plan, there was an initial $500,000 that was earmarked for housing supports. And the thought was that that would come into play for our funding for CSC and funding to take into consideration for fiscal year 25. Additionally, when you were looking at the strategic plan and you were looking at the 5 pillars for kindergarten readiness, the 2 of them were determined for it to be, with the other one being housing. And so the goal would be, or the point would be, to be able to allocate funding there to be able to then support housing programs in Leon County.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you want me to, I can just clarify a little bit more. So really, this is to support your kindergarten readiness impact. So the kindergarten readiness. So again, on-ramp would be an increase and continuation of on-ramp, which is getting families who are at the ALICE level rolled into school readiness. The statute allows for a third party to come in for 2 to 3 months, and then they can roll into school readiness. So that's what that would be. And then rebound and recovery is a resiliency program that starts in pre-K and backs up to the governor and first lady's resiliency program that starts in kindergarten. So the funding here would be to keep that going, but then expand to those early learning centers in the vicinity of the 56 classrooms that we were able to do rebound and recovery in this past year, such that those kids are able to come into those public schools and everybody has that same resiliency training. The $500,000, when we first started talking about kindergarten readiness and really just our needs assessment, we knew that housing and affordable housing and emergency housing was an issue. So the council is aware that I've been meeting with Leon County and City of Tallahassee for, ever since I've been in this position. And one of the issues is emergency housing, particularly for families. While we cannot fund anything for adults, which would be the Carney Center, the 4 other homeless shelters are family homeless shelters. Family Promise is the largest. It houses 160 at any given time. Then you have CCYS, which is youth homeless, about 18. You've got Refuge House, which is 37. And then we've got Breon House, which is pregnant or young mothers, which is 16. So in working with the city, at the city and the county actually presented a plan to do line item funding for those shelters. They would take the majority and all of, not even the majority, all of any funding that is provided to the Carney Center. And we looked proportionally at how we would provide funding to the other 4, considering that they're children and families. So that total ends up being 500,000 split across, for us, those 4 shelters, the largest of which is Family Promise. Then there is another $1 million in here, and that $1 million really can be used for whatever it is the council would like. If we stay in the pillars for kindergarten readiness that impact, one of those pillars is housing stability. And I know that there is still a great need for that. And so there is the ability to use some of that money to even help more in that area, with Family Promise being that shelter. They are the ones that deal with families. And then there's more money in there to look at any other early learning, kindergarten readiness, any other programs that may come to light that the council would like to fund. So that is kind of the explanation. And I don't mean to over talk Dina, but I wanted to explain that a little bit further so that it was kind of clear where we were going in that thought process given conversations and staff work.
Strange. Okay, to kind of cut to the chase, when you add all these budget numbers up, the only way to fund all of that, I guess, is to go back to increase the millage rate to 0.375, where you actually have a surplus of 153,000. Otherwise, you either have to cut 433,000, 926,000, 1.1 million. Am I reading this correctly?
In new money. So I want to be sure that it's clear that's not cutting programs that are already funded.
Right. No, in order to meet these numbers that you budgeted, that would have to be the corresponding millage rate to make that happen.
Right.
Otherwise, something has to go.
Well,
Okay.
we could leave the millage rate exactly as it is today. And again, have enough money to fund all of what we have proposed funding. We would not need to go back to the 0.375 to meet, one, we haven't even set what our goals are. And remember, the built into what we've already spent is that 650,000 that we sort of overspent during the summer months. So I don't want doing a rollback of where we are today, which is a rollback of a rollback, I think would be problematic. And that's the guy who's always, trying to keep the millage rate as low as possible. I do think it'd be problematic at meeting our current needs, and that is that's just based on 3 years of experience of watching this.
So we're currently at 0.3248, correct?
No, 3.477. 0.3477.
Okay, which means we would be $433,000 short of meeting all of these numbers that you budgeted, correct?
Yeah, but again, this is a little misleading in terms of it is based on doing what we did last year. many of the things that we did last year, including going 650,000 over summer funding, is not something that we have to do.
Right, so but some of these numbers would have to be reduced in order for it to about, right?
Yes.
So we'd have to cut out $433,000 of these numbers above it, either youth mentoring, early learning, youth development programs.
Well, it also doesn't take into account our current surplus, nor does it take into account, for example, the 8% that we put aside in reserves. Where one of the categories here is the $2 million that Sika is talking about is for housing. That is, part of that is emergency housing. We have a bucket of money that we've never touched that deals with emergencies. So it may mean shifting money around, but everything we are currently funding can be funded under our current millage rate without going back to 0.375. Again, everything that is being proposed can be funded under the 0.347. If we go to 0.375 like we were year before last, we would have additional resources. And again, these numbers are based on a very conservative and modest projection from the property appraiser's office. And those would be the same numbers that yielded us $600,000 more this year than we were projected.
One second. Sure. So, if we stayed at 0.347, the increase we're projecting is $760,000.
Yes,
And what I think people are asking us to do is to roll back to 0.3248
yes,
or to 0.3153.
yes.
One of those two, which is what the ask is of the majority of people that are coming to speak to us.
Quick clarification, the reason why both of those are on there is when we came to you last month, we estimated the rollback at 0.31. Trim Oasis has now opened, and with the current valuation estimate, the actual rollback in that Trim portal is the 0.32. So that's why we have both of them listed.
And Mr. Hannon, just before, that if you remember at the last meeting, I talked about how unique the year before that was, where we had a tremendous amount of growth in Leon County and property values were going up dramatically. We still have growth and we still have property values going up, but not nearly as dramatically as this time last year. It really was reflective of like the 6 months prior to this time last year. That's why that number is different. That's why the number is a little bit more from a rollback, because originally it was based on numbers more similar to last year than this year. And that's why a true rollback would be the 0.32. But they originally thought it would go back as far as 0.31. You're gonna jump in here.
Just one quick clarifying, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
I'll let you answer.
What is the undesignated amount of cash that you anticipate ending current fiscal year with?
So we anticipate somewhere between 443 and 508 undesignated.
Is that just ending in your income statement? What's in your balance sheet in cash?
In the balance sheet.
That would be considered undesignated.
That is the number.
Yeah, that is the number.
That is considered undesignated
Undesignated.
because, Brent, it's a great question because there is a large amount of money that sits in cash that is designated for a family resource center that we actually have the cash, and it's designated, but not, it's a little squishy.
And that's very helpful.
Yeah, and perinatal
It is
programs.
squishy.
That's helpful because my context was from the May meeting we had plus or minus $12 million worth of cash, and I'm spinning my head trying to figure out.
So 4 million of that is for the Family Resource Center. Another 2.8 is for perinatal programs, another 280 is for transportation, another 150 is for family engagement. And then there still is some unspent money from this current fiscal year that goes out to the providers with whom we've contracted. So that is cash in the bank, but a large number of that.
Large amount of that
is
in program, but there's $3.3 million as of the May financial statements that said it was general. So
That just. I'm gonna go back to see. All of that.
and it may be designated in operations for the rest of the year. I just wanted to understand.
Right, that's the perinatal money, because it passed in May,
So it's,
so it's designated,
it's in essence program money.
absolutely.
So I'm sorry. So the new money that's coming in, this is again, depending on how you look at budget. The new money that's coming in is for all new spending for programs that we have not even contemplated. That's why, Mr. Hanna, when you ask that question, it's really important that we not lose focus of decisions that we have to make. But again, it's all decisions that we get to make. It's not like we're gonna run out of money. It's a matter of whether or not. Well, one, we have emergency money no matter what. Two, some of the money that Mr. Johnson is referring to will, while it's encumbered, will not be spent during fiscal year 24-25. Because some of that is Family Resource Center, which actually rolls into 25-26. But it's set aside and sitting there. Thank you. So that's why it's, on paper, it sort of looks like, oh my God, here. If we just want to spend what we talked about spending, then we're gonna see this $400 and something thousand deficit. That is not the case. You don't need to go to 0.375. I'm not saying don't, I'm just saying you don't need to meet all of what we have funded, plan on funding, have committed to funding, and still give us opportunity for new funding. Mr. Johnson.
I know that I may be the minority voice in this conversation. However, I think we as a council decided on the very first time that we would do the rollback. It was always my great hope that we would go back to the original number. It came to that number of 3.75 as a compromise, knowing that we had the capacity by statute to go as much as $500,000. One of the things that I think is found in the wisdom in the statute as it was created was such that we make our decision regarding the millage rate after the county makes its decision and the school board makes its decision. And then it comes to us. And the beauty of what we have here in the creation of this Children's Services Council, unlike the county commission, which is a political body, the school district is a political body. The Children's Services Council, by virtue of its design, although it has electeds who are its members, it is also comprised of persons who are citizens. And subsequently, I see us, unlike the county or unlike the school district, as apolitical. Instead, we are governed, I believe, by what should be good stewardship of the taxpayers' dollars. But I would hope that we would, because when we roll our millage rate back, the impacts in terms of taxpayers is far less significant than millage rates when they are rolled back by those two principal jurisdictions. And if I'm not mistaken, I can't recall a time where the county has rolled back its millage rate That means in both feast and famine and check times of the change in valuations and property taxes, yet the millage rate remains the same such that they are equipped to use those monies that they collect to be able to still have impact. I don't recall, Mr. Superintendent, in my 6 years that we've rolled back the millage rate for the school district, such that when valuations occur and they drop and they rise and fall and they ebb, they wax and they wane, we still maintain the same millage rate such that we can be able to collect the resources that we need to operate our school. So here now, we as an apolitical organization made up of electeds and citizens charged with the responsibility of meeting the needs of this targeted population of children and families who are found at and below the poverty line. I really question. I understand the nobility of our intention, but I believe that those valuations and those increases in valuations provide us with just that much more resources that we have at our disposal. What we then have is to commandeer our stewardship such that we are best equipped to be able to put just that much more resources to meet the needs of those children who we identified when we created this Children's Services Council to meet. And I think I understand the nobility, I understand the public interest, but we're talking about the difference of $1 million from year to year. So when we talk about saving the taxpayers, the burden of saving the taxpayers is not on the Children's Services Council. It should perhaps be on those political jurisdictions. And if their wisdom is that they would keep the millage rate the same, I can't imagine an organization who at best collects less than $10 million would then be the arbiters of saving our taxpayers when what our real responsibility should be, and that is to be to be the best stewards possible so that we can have the greatest impact, because we did so much work to make sure we did this right. We went and did the studies. We did the community engagement. We brought on professionals who helped us to identify these, we wrote it on the wall that it might be plain to us what the impacts were, what would be our best schedule of operations. We even set forth a timeline where we would create these pillars and fund them over 5 years. And so when there is an increase in valuation, here now that provides us with just that much more to have impact in those areas that we have designated as our areas of critical concern. So I'm hoping that the decision will be for us to go back to the original millage rate that was born of great compromise, but then provides us with even greater opportunity to have impact across all of those areas of concern that we have identified. Not go back, not even maintain the current rollback, but go back to that area of compromise that was born of our original conversation. And then we can continue based upon the guidance that we came to in agreement with staff and through all of the arduous work that we did with the professionals we were able to bring in, who were able to give us guidance. And then we talk about how we can maximize that to have the greatest impact. And I don't think we do that by rolling the millage rate back.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get into a discussion about.
No, this is.
So that's the way they set it up.
Right, and I'm fine going back and whacking some of this out to balance wherever we end up. But one thing I think that would be interesting, and I don't know if the property appraiser can tell us this information, of the $2.3 billion increase to property values in Leon County, what number of that is attributed to new properties and what number of that is attributed to increased property values? And is there a way for the property appraiser to tell us the difference between, surely there seems like there would be a number a way to do that by these properties were added to the tax rolls, and then you could deduct the math the back way and say, well, then the value of my house increased by $20,000 or whatever, right? And so is there potentially a way to capture, we're not increasing the taxes for residents, but we're simply we're making sure we're properly taxing the new properties that have come on the tax rolls. Does that make any sense at all?
It does make sense,
And I-
and we can surely ask that question because I understand what you're asking.
There are
We understand what you're asking.
There are three buckets that when the property appraiser looks at. One is brand new construction. That's the easiest. That was not on the tax rolls before. It's now on the tax roll. The smallest bucket is your house. They will go through and do on a fairly regular basis, an assessment of all the properties. Those go up the smallest amount. Where the property value increase has occurred is somebody who's a Leon County resident moving out of one house and into the new house, and the new house is valued at much more on the tax rolls. Or when they buy it at 500,000, but it's being assessed as though it's a $250,000 house because that house has been sitting by the same owner, for 20 years. So that bucket is a huge amount of money. The reason I don't think that it will be as big this year as it has in the past is because the interest rates have gone up and it slowed, the sales of homes down a little, but it's still dramatic. So those are the three buckets that'll come back. The smallest bucket are the existing homeowners that aren't moving. Everything stays the same. When you look, if you've been in your house for 10 years, it's the smallest increase of all three of those buckets. But
those, the majority of people that speak to us are the ones that are concerned about that small increase from what they paid the previous year, even though, because their property value did increase, right?
Yeah, well, it did. And if we go to if it's on the home itself, somebody says they're on a fixed income and they don't want an increase in their taxes on that.
Or a business owner.
That will, if it's a commercial property that rents to people, that drives their rent increase up. The other thing I'll say is we've been in existence for 3.5 years, for 3 years and 3 months. It will be 3.5 years by the time the fiscal year is over. And those 3.5 years, we have never not had the money that we felt necessary to fund all of the programs that came before us and still have additional money left over. The rationale against rolling back last year was sort of, Mr. Jones, the point you're making tonight, and that is we have more needs and we should be meeting those needs. We've never not met the needs. And oh, by the way, rolling back a rate generated $600,000 more than anyone anticipated. So rollback is supposed to be you bring in the same amount of money last year as you did this year. We brought in 600,000 more rolling it back. Shooting for a zero gain, we got a $600,000 gain. I am not an advocate of rolling it back. If we left it the same this year as this coming year as it is the year that we are in, we will generate. Dina has done a good job of specifying how much. But last year I remember Commissioner Proctor coming and being very upset and kind of directing it at me. And I looked and I said to everyone in the room, anyone who wants to take this bet, I will bet you right now that we will generate more money than we did in the past. And my guess was somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 or 300,000. Well, turns out I should have been a little less conservative because it was 600,000. I don't think it'll be 600,000 this year. I don't think it'll be, my guess is it'll probably be, if we left it where it is, or if we tried to roll it back at the 0.32, whatever the number is, we would generate a little bit more. But if we leave it the same, it's, do you know what's the projection if we left it the same at 60? I promise you we'll end up raising more. And my point of telling you about the emergency funding is that's real money. That is real money that we can use at any point that we have a need that we were not thinking about, but comes to us.
So, last year we rolled it back and we're being asked again this year by the majority of the speakers to roll it back even further, correct? Reluctantly, I followed your lead last year and I supported rolling it back. Right. And I will follow your lead again.
I will not be supporting rolling it back.
Okay.
But it just, and this is the reason I wanted everybody here to hear this.
Okay.
For the public that's coming, my recommendation is that we leave it exactly as it is, and we will end up generating about $1 million more, when it's all said and done. It's projected at right around 800,000, 700 and something thousand. I'm telling you that I'm not sure I'd take the same $20 bet to anybody who wants to come, but I might, because we will generate significantly more money and we've yet to not be able to meet the needs of those who have come to us and asked. So that's why I'm supporting that.
Mr. Chair, may I say something? I know I'm not on the committee.
Yes, you are
It's for
today.
informational purposes, but based on the information that we have gotten in the county, Amazon attributes to more than 50% of the increased revenue that we have from tax rolls. So it's not necessarily on the shoulders of our homeowners.
That was my question, was is there a way for the property appraiser to tell us
It is
that Amazon, of this 2.3 billion, Amazon represents,
over 50%. I think it's 57%.
I didn't know it's $1 billion facility, but
They paid taxes last year too. So, and I don't think that, maybe the property appraiser's going in with the new bill.
I after hearing your response, I'm completely satisfied, and I, again, like I did last year, follow your lead. That's all I got to say. I'm done. I'm ready. Let's do it.
So, Mr. Jones, we're not voting, by the way. We're not going to make a recommendation.
My concern remains the same. So if we generate more, we do this budget based upon what we anticipate that we're going to collect. If we were to take the millage rate to 0.375, the amount of money that we would then have in our budget to then make available to meet the needs that we've identified is even greater. Again, this goes back to the issue of our stewardship. We've created our own processes by which we put these monies on the street and by the methodology by which we fund organizations. We create the RFPs based upon the amount of money that we collect. Why would we not want to have more money available to create more RFPs, to create more impact that we can then ultimately be able to measure that impact ultimately based upon the return on the investment? Why would we want, the opportunity is for us not to save money. We've been gifted this opportunity at the voters' behest by an overwhelming majority to create RFPs that put money on the street to meet the needs of children. So why would there ever be a conversation for us to roll back when the impact of our decision on taxpayers is minimal compared to the impact that is generated by the larger jurisdiction? And I understand that our speakers come here. I've also dealt with public speakers. If I had followed public speakers and their numbers during the pandemic, I can only imagine the impacts that would have had on our schools and our classrooms. So I appreciate public comment, but then at the end of the day, here we, unlike those political jurisdictions, can be guided by something far different. And that is the methodology that we put in place to make certain that the monies that we collect are then having the greatest impact possible.
Mr. Jones, I'm going to kind of answer your question by making a statement. And that is, I think 2 years ago, I said, I can't wait until the day comes where I am making the motion that we adopt the full millage rate. Because what that will mean is that, one, we have a need that is that we can justify. We are now, no one in this council has seen any data to support any program that we've funded up to this point. We're just now beginning to see data come in. The reason that I'm advocating the position I'm advocating isn't because I want to stop money from going to kids and family in this county. By the way, I do want to take exception to one comment you made, and that is, it's not a targeted population. Targeted population is Leon County. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how little money you have, which part of town you live on, which part of town you don't live on. It's to meet the needs that aren't currently being met for children and families in Leon County, period. It doesn't say we're targeting this area or these people making this amount of money. But I'll go back to my point. No, it doesn't.
We did a whole.
Oh, no. We did a needs assessment that said, what is a need? I'm saying the language that the voters adopted didn't say it's targeted to any particular population. It is meant to meet the needs that are currently not being met for children and families in Leon County. So I'm looking forward to the day where we have data to support programs that we are funding and that show that by increasing the funding in those programs, we will get better results. Right now, we have no data to support any of the decisions we've made. And I'm still advocating that we essentially generate about 800,000, maybe as much as 1 million more this year than we did last year. And last year we raised 600,000 more than we did the year before. And never have we not been able to meet the needs of any population that we're trying to serve. Again, the only time we've ever stopped ourselves from spending is when we have no data to support the request. And the final point I'll make is we're talking about for 1 year. By doing it for 1 year, knowing that we have reserves for emergencies. So we are not, if suddenly there is a need that arises and the council as a whole would like to support funding it, we have that money. We absolutely have it. And by the way, last year, funding cycle that we are currently in, we found $650,000 more than we budgeted for summer programming. Remember, that was not money that we were anticipating spending. I promise the money is there. And I will join you, and I know it will shock you when I make that motion for the full millage rate. But Mr. Jones, I cannot wait to get to that. Because I think you're right, there is a need. I just don't think we have figured out what the need is and the best way to deliver it yet.
Mr. Hammond. So 2 things. One, I do think the pain is real for a lot of families. Going to the grocery store, you fill a cart up with 20 items and pay over $100. I mean, I understand, I get it. And I think this is a compromise. And I'll be proud to second your motion when it comes time to make it. So I'm still, kind of take some issue with how we budget, how we take money from 1 year and spend it over the course of X number of years and capture it all in that first year. To be clear, these numbers that are budgeted, that we'll have to find a way to cut $433,000 out of these numbers. But these are multi-year deals, right? And we're never gonna have a point, because we keep doing this, where those programs are gonna bump into each other. Because obviously we can't fund all of these multi-year programs along with all the programs we did last year.
Well, for youth mentoring, that's just 9 months. When you get to, actually, I don't think any of these are multi-year. The only one that gives you a little bit more than a year would be youth development.
So then, Cynthia,
these
what
are not-
happens, so what happens if this is 12 months and we're spending all of this money? When that little $2.8 million that I'm all about, we're going to prenatal and having all those, when that comes back, we aren't gonna be able to afford it. Is that right?
By that time, I think we'll have data to show that we need to do something different with the millage rates. By that time, because that's a 2-year.
Mr. Andy, your question is a good question. That's the point. That decision can be made sitting at this table at this time in 2025, and nothing will change. Absolutely nothing will change. There isn't a program that we are currently funding that we cannot fund, including the ones that we've proposed funding for the next 2 years, with leaving the millage rate as it is. I am not just certain of that. I would stake my entire life, my children's life, and God, I cannot even believe I'm going to say this, my 2 grandchildren's lives.
I don't believe.
I am 100% right on this.
So I just, y'all understand the topic here, the issue of how we budget? Meaning that we entered into how long, the $2.8 million was for how long? 18 months?
2.8, 2.5, yeah, 2.25 years.
But we took it all out of last year. So none of that's reflected in this year's budget at all. So it isn't like we take that and say X amount this year, X amount the next year, and X amount for the remaining.
Well, we do, we just don't put it in this budget. So we have done that. So that 2.8 million, we've designated the years that it is spent. But when we have to present this budget, and this was something that our accountant helped me do so that the numbers don't look inflated from year to year. We only show you a year's worth. So when we say 2.8 million, we encumber it in the year that you approve it, and it sits there instead of breaking it up and putting it in the budget. And in my opinion, and again, with all due respect, you've been doing this longer than me, but in my opinion, it's a safety net from spending it by accident or cutting it when you've agreed that you're gonna do it for that amount of time. So that's why I made the decision, and it was me, it was nobody else but me, making the decision that when you approve it, we encumber it in that year and we hold it and move it. And as we get to the end of that, if the data is showing that that prenatal program is working, then we as a team are gonna bring you back. Look, it's working, just like we're basically doing with the on-ramp and with rebound and recovery. Look, it's working. So we suggest we take additional monies and continue doing that program.
Which is why I can
At some
say
point, something's gonna have to give.
with 100% certainty. Yeah, but at some point, you're right, it is gonna have to give.
Yeah.
And it will probably be the millage rate. When I say with certainty, I mean, I put my house on it. All right. I mean, I'm so certain of this. That if now we may come back next year, we may say everything is rocking along and we will find ourselves in a deficit for the year 25, 26. And the thing that's gonna have to give is the millage rate. But we can make that decision next year without hurting our current funding and any proposed funding for the next year.
Well, I don't want you to be wrong, because
You don't mind giving up.
You'll be joking. You'll be joking.
No.
I could have lost everything. Your wife and children, house is castle. My goodness.
What else do we need?
I think we're I think
I'm sorry.
we're good.
I was
I do think, well,
Motion for the budget?
It's a weekly too.
no, we're not going to make, for the budget itself, I don't think we need.
Are we not making a recommendation? to
We
the
are.
council?
We're going to essentially, and we've already kind of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us out of the 9. Mr. Watts, is planning on watching it online. So that's 7 out of 9. We can send this recording also to the other 2. So they've got a shot at looking at it. So that we can keep the full board meeting, short.
But I'm saying there was we were making a recommendation from this committee, correct?
We are not, well, I shouldn't say that. Anyone is entitled to make a motion. We have not done it in the past.
Okay, I just always thought that there would be a recommendation coming from the committee.
We have all of the proposed millage rates that we send to each member of the council, and we share with them the reflections of the group. Last year, we were sort of unified in our decision, but we still brought it forward as a non-recommendation.
Which means that it's just discussion.
Right. So if you want to vote, we can. If you want to make.
For example, now I defer to you because you chaired this committee the entire time. I just hate that when you go back to the full board, then the same person who participated in this process then come back with questions again at the full board meeting when we should all be on the same page as members of this committee. That's my only thing. Such that, so we're 4 of what, 9? So if there are any other questions, they should come from the other 5 and not from us 4 because we're all in agreement, is all I'm suggesting.
Yeah, we've had our time to.
And that we've come to some agreement and conclusion relative to the budget, and then you would present the budget to the full board.
Right.
Right, that's what I thought would occur. But, because that's what we did when I chaired program services. So.
Well, we did have the full discussion so that we were able to answer the questions of the council member. We just got lucky that the makeup of the committee, where we sort of asked all the questions and had all the answers, so that when we came back to the full council, we were able, if the questions were similar, we were able to answer them. Mr. Jones, I am 100% okay with this committee making a recommendation to the full council. The budget is not done by line item, it's done by category, so that's an easy thing.
Yes.
And the millage rate would be the only other recommendation we would be making.
Point of clarification, if I may. So to your point, what you all have done in the past, this committee has made the decision in the past not to make a recommendation, and we actually give all the same information to the council. If you choose to make a recommendation, which you absolutely can do, then we will give to the council what you recommended. So if you choose millage rate 1.0, which you won't because you can't, then we would bring a budget that equates to that 1.0. So I just want to, I like to just give all of the information so that when you all are making your decision, you have all of that.
I think it's such an important, and this is as the chair, I never felt comfortable as 4 out of 10, it's just now 4 out of 9, but 4 out of 10 saying this is the recommendation and putting sort of the burden on the other 6 to override a recommendation of a committee of 4. It was purposeful, and I asked Mr. Hanna to please sit on. If I was going to be treasurer, I wanted him on, because it was the 2 of us who, reached the compromise that we initially to begin with. So,
Which
so
all are willing to, which you're willing to roll back twice.
by the way, it's raising more money. There's more money for programs, considerably more.
I wasn't necessarily willing to roll back twice. I asked him where he stood, and he said he was not gonna recommend that we roll back twice. And I said, I will follow you. Did I agree?
So Mr. Johnson, do you want to make a motion or do you want to?
No, I'm not prepared to, and I guess I will wave my flag and say, I don't think it's. My biggest concern is, and this is from my experience of summer before last, sitting as a community review member and looking at the needs assessment, and I was assigned to summer feeding. Was there a needs assessment done? Yes. Was it done in a manner where I could make a recommendation to the council of how to direct funds? The answer is no, because I knew in feeding, for example, that there were 30 or 40 providers that were providing feeding services in our Leon County. But I had no data to support where they were targeting their efforts. And so when it came time for funding recommendations, I was like, the needs assessment is one step short. We need a heat map of where they're applying the resources so that I could feel good that we were meeting the statutory and ordinance mandate, that we were not in the business of duplicating services that were being provided for others. I couldn't state that we were making sure that all the federal monies that were available were being spent in that area. So, you know, I can get to supporting the current millage rate, but I will tell you that I'm keenly focused on making sure that we're not in a position of spending money, because the $7.5 or $8 or $9 million that this council gets will not move needles on the social service problems that this community and every other one has. We've got to be very strategic. We've got to know that we're not duplicating services. And that's where I'm going to just have a, you know, a rifle shot focus on my getting up to speed until we vote on this as a council.
You got 10 days.
So I've got half a day.
I know.
And I've got more than that.
I've now watched you look through an RFP, a draft of an RFP, and I have no doubt we just improved the process.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I do want to open up, we've made comments, we're not going to take a vote. So there isn't public comment that's required. But I do want to, because it's on the agenda, that before we take a vote, that there's public comment. And Ms. McFadden came, and
You may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
You may ask anyone to speak.
Okay, Liz, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're here. If you would like to speak, I definitely want to hear what you.
I'd love to, and I'm, you know, having been in your shoes before, I appreciate all the conversation that was had, and it's always a tough one, it's always an important one.
Can you just state your name and address?
Sorry, it's Liza McFadden, 2617 Marston Road, Tallahassee.
And it also the.
I know.
Just for the record, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And so I would say, one of the challenges I think that you're going through is something that the county and the city school board don't is, as you know, I voted last time on the rollback and agree with it. And I do think you have the budget now to stick with this, which is great. But I do think if you can get to a point where you're not going back and forth every year, it's going to make the public and you all feel so much better. So that's my big picture kind of thing, having been through that. I would say also one of the things I am pleased to see in the proposed budget is, you know, the conversation on the $2 million for including housing supports for families. You all may remember one of my issues that I'm very passionate about is homeless services. And we all discussed many times that it was time to go out and try to get federal funds. The ARPA funds are now crashing. Those folks are going to be left and I think a really tough place. And so, you know, I'm really happy to see that increase in the housing piece and emergency housing. There's been a lot of articles in the newspaper about, and I don't need to tell Daryl, Rocky, you guys know what's going on with the homelessness and the children's issues, and that we're seeing more and more of that cycle through. And there's a real challenge with the funding for those organizations. And my understanding, you know, a lot of them are in a really challenging place right now because they're used to CHSP and the ARPA funds coming in. And they now face an October 1 fiscal year with no guarantee of where their funding is coming from. And so this process to them, you know, is really important. And so I am really pleased to see that you address that here, at least acknowledging the need for the housing supports. And I would say otherwise, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. I think, Emily, I would agree with you on the small business point that you made. And yeah, on the SIPs. And so those would be my, sort of overview comments that I have. And I don't know if you have any questions or anybody else does.
One, I'm really appreciative of you coming. Two, I remember that first group meeting that we had over at the City Hall, where there were white pieces of paper all over the wall. We all got so many dots, right? And I will tell you that 2/3 of my dots went to early childhood. I loaded them up. 1/3 went to homeless. And the reason I say that is I point this out is, Brent, to your point, it's a good one. We are never going to move any needle if we try to solve every problem. But I had however many dots they gave us, 15 or 20, and I divvied them up, and I put my priority on early childhood and probably 2/3 of them and 1/3 to the homeless, because I thought if we can focus all of our attention on those areas and show a needle moving. So I applaud you for showing up, and that the issue of homelessness as it affects children and their families is real. It is very real. And that is something we talked about as a council from the beginning. So I am supportive of finding funding. I'm a little bit confused by what the county's position is, what I know that they brought Sika in to have conversations, but just so everyone is aware, we as a council have not voted on anything. We have incorporated into budgets funding to help children and their families who are homeless, because one, it's the right thing to do, and two, it sort of meets our mission. But we haven't voted on anything, and the only time anyone from the county, no one from the city has ever come, but anybody from the county's come, is when Shankton came. And to his credit, he was just like, I'm not even sure why I'm here. But he spoke of the county's position that if they were going to remove funding from children's services, and ask that those that are currently being funded through the CHSP, who are providing children's services, would start coming here, that we needed to get them ready for our the way that we issue grants, which is a little more stringent than the CHSP. And that would be happening. This is kind of, if you remember at our last finance committee meeting, Commissioner Cummings was on the committee at the time and asked the question or raised the issue of, hey, by the way, not for 24-25, which is what we're about to go through, but for 25-26, when the CHSP funding program, they agreed to do it, leave it the same for 2 more years, but we did need to start thinking about it on that 2-year window out. That issue of homelessness and how to fund those services is sort of embedded in that conversation. also embedded in it is the small, grant recipients that the CHSP funds, but in that was tucked this issue of homelessness. So I think we as a council, maybe we need to workshop this, maybe it's a real budget, like on a line item, where we have a real understanding of, like the $2 million. When I looked at the $2 million originally, I thought that was all early childhood. I didn't know that any of it was going to, was being proposed to go to homeless services. And it isn't, because we haven't voted on it, but I think as a council, we need to talk about it. And I think that, Liza, you as an advocate need to be at that table. And I think the city, by the way, we have 5 commissioners or 4 and a mayor, and we have 7 county commissioners. We are fortunate to have Commissioner Cummings here, but those groups need to come to the council and we need to have this conversation. And it's not an easy conversation. By the way, we may need to use some of our emergency funding to meet the needs of this community and the homeless community. But I don't think, I can only speak for myself. I'm not comfortable doing that until we're having this conversation. So the fact that, one, you understand the position we're all in, having been seated at this table, and 2, you're such a strong advocate for an issue I believe in personally, but I just want to make sure that it's meeting sort of the requirements of CSC, and that the county and the city aren't sort of kicking the ball to us and saying, guess what? We're not dealing with it. You deal with it. It's unfair to, the groups that you're advocating for, but that's a decision that, to me, the nine council members need to make, but it's only going to be with good input from folks like you.
Thank you. And I do think maybe at some point, a joint meeting of the city, county, and CSC on some of these bigger, longer term issues might make sense. I know that the city and the county sometimes get together and do that, to think strategically and long term. That might just be another way to look at that. And I'm more than happy to come back and do a little bit of a survey of the rest of Florida on some of the family emergency shelter and where their funds are broken up and so forth. If that's helpful over long term.
Yeah, I think it'll really help. Like, do other CSCs participate in that? And I know in some of the larger counties, it makes it a little easier. They have a few more zeros at the end, but I would love to know. Again, I know you're not just Leon County when it comes to advocacy, so I would love to know what.
Absolutely. I'd be more than happy to do that and bring it back. So it's probably not by July 18th because I'm leaving on my vacation tomorrow.
Well, enjoy the vacation, then I do appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Okay, it is item 9 is the next meeting agenda. Don't ask, because I'm not really sure what's going to be on it. I'll make sure you get it.
It'll be in September.
And we are that committee will not meet on a Monday or a Tuesday. We are going to focus in on finding a Thursday in September that works for everyone's calendar. And we will then set it for a year in advance. Item 9 is committee member comments. Seeing none, item 10 is 7:10, and we are adjourned. Without objection.
Rocky's looking at everybody, he's like,
I'll say.